What's up, everyone, and welcome to the MintCast podcast. This is the official podcast for Mint Press News. I am Mnar Adley. I'm the founder and director of Mint Press. It's been a few weeks since I've posted a new interview, as I have been traveling in London doing a few speaking engagements on the genocide in Gaza. And I was also invited to a few podcasts where I spoke extensively about how Palestine's Arab neighbors are aiding Israel's genocide, literally from Egypt, for example, dedicating 5 ports to ship over $330 million worth of exports to Israel. And for all we know, that likely includes weapons, of course, that is all to help Israel circumvent the Yemeni Red Sea blockade. I also needed to take some time to improve the video and audio setup so we can provide the highest quality interviews and content and produce more for our viewers and listeners. And so I just want to remind everyone that we here at Mint Press have been heavily throttled by YouTube. Many people in the comments have noticed that. And so we ask you to hit like, subscribe, comment, and engage with our videos as much as you can to help us circumvent that censorship. And we all know why YouTube would throttle our coverage. So anyways, without further ado, I wanted to bring on our next guest, which is Scott Ritter. Scott is a former United States Corps intelligence officer and UN weapons inspector in Iraq. He's an author and a geopolitical analyst whose work you can find at scottritter.com. He has closely followed the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East. So we're very honored to have you here, Scott, with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, Israel recently launched a new wave of attacks against Lebanon, planting and detonating explosives in Lebanese pagers, killing many and injuring thousands of Lebanese civilians. Now, if we look at the media coverage here and in the United States and in the West in general, they are headlining with Israel planting explosive in hundreds of pagers used by the militant armed group Hezbollah, which have exploded simultaneously in Lebanon and Syria. And so I'm just going to play a video from State Department spokesperson Matt Miller to hear what he had to say about this recent attack. So let's play that.
So we are gathering information on this incident. I can tell you that the U.S. was not involved in it. The U.S. was not aware of this incident in advance, and at this point we're gathering information.
And what information have you gathered so far?
We'll continue to collect information. I don't have any public readout to give now, but we're collecting information in the same way that journalists are across the world to gather the facts about what might have happened.
Obviously, it doesn't take much guesswork who the most likely culprit would be in terms of doing this, in terms of who the enemy of Hezbollah is. Do you have any indications that to doubt that it would be Israel that was behind the...
I don't have any assessment to offer one way or other at this point.
Okay, so once again, we have Matt Miller giving us the biggest non-answer, like a pretty standard non-answer that we're used to hearing the spokesperson of the State Department give. So Scott, what is your response to what Miller has had to say about this incident?
Well, I mean, it's a smokescreen being put up by the State Department. That's their job to make it difficult for reporters to discern what's happening on the ground in Lebanon. I think there's no doubt that Israel was behind this. If you read the Israeli press is saying that this was a Mossad operation. And that's interesting because if Mossad is indeed taking credit for this, there's a 100% certainty that the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States was at least aware of this. Now, we know in the past that when Israel has sought to carry out targeted assassinations, and despite the fact that the vast majority of the people who were victims of this terrorist act, and it is a terrorist act, weren't killed. There were, I believe, either 8 or 9 deaths, probably more along the way as some of these injuries manifest themselves. But this was targeted assassination. In the past, when Israel sought to carry out actions of this nature, they did inform their CIA counterparts for deconfliction purposes to make sure that it wouldn't create a policy problem for the United States or disrupt American operations. So there's no doubt in my mind that the CIA was notified by Israel at some point. I'm not saying that they gave them significant advance notifications, but enough notification that the CIA could make alterations as needed to ensure that its resources weren't impacted by this indiscriminate attack. This means that the United States knew about this, and there can be no doubt about that. And it also means that Mr. Miller is lying. But then again, that's his job as a State Department spokesperson, is to lie, is to spin information in a way that protects, I can't say American interests, because when I say America, I'm invoking we the people. And this attack was not in the interests of we the people. So protecting the interests of the Biden administration, which, the U.S. government in this case. Let's be clear. The United States would not carry out an action of this nature. I know when I've mentioned this, people take umbrage and they say, well, the U.S. has bombed this. They've attacked wedding parties in Afghanistan. They've done X, they've done Y, they've done Z. Yes, those were military operations, and the United States has long hidden under the umbrella of legitimate intent, that our intent wasn't to attack a wedding party. Our intent was to take out terrorists. So we had a legitimate military target, and we're sorry it went bad. This was a level of indiscriminate attack that no legal authority in the United States could ever sign off on, because it fits the definition of terrorism. And so not only was the United States cognizant of this attack, we were cognizant of the nature, the scope, and scale of this attack. And we therefore knew that this was a terrorist attack, and we did nothing to stop it. So we are complicit in this attack, plain and simple. Israel could not and would not have carried out an attack of this scope and scale without notifying the United States. And the United States apparently did nothing to prevent this.
Well, Matt Miller has also been described as the smirking liar. And, that's what he's been really good at, is, wearing his perfectly ironed suit to pretend like, the United States doesn't really know where these bombs are being dropped in Gaza or what Israel's actions are in the region. But Israel is one of, the strongest partner of the United States, receiving over $10.3 million per day of our taxpayer money. And so I would definitely have to agree that the United States, of course, would have known of this kind of attack that Israel and its Mossad are planning. What kind of precedent does this set? I mean, have we ever seen anything like this before?
Nothing on this scope and scale. Israel, since at least 1996, has been carrying out targeted assassinations of Hamas officials, Hezbollah officials, people they call terrorists, using personal electronic devices that have had explosives embedded in them. I think the most famous incident took place in 1996, where the Israeli Shin Bet assassinated a Hamas operative. The nickname was the Engineer. He was a bomb maker. And they managed to get a phone to him and made a phone call, or were monitoring phone calls. And when they confirmed that he was on the listening to the phone, they detonated the explosive in the earpiece and blew his head off. And they've done this repeatedly. But they've always been very targeted attacks. So, trying to take out an individual here, an individual there. Something of this scope and scale has never been attempted before. And one of the reasons is that I think you can defend a targeted assassination. People may disagree with your, how you define the target, et cetera. But from a moral standpoint, I will tell you that if I were an intelligence official or security official, and there was a person out there that my legal chain of command said needs to be eliminated, I would have no problem giving him a cell phone that blew his head off. It's the way of the world. But I would have a huge problem disseminating explosive devices into society with no way of knowing who had them, who possessed them. And we're talking about not hundreds, but thousands of devices. They could have been in a pocket of somebody standing next to their child in a grocery store.
Exactly.
They could have been on a dresser as a wife was cleaning the dresser. They could have been held by somebody. It wasn't the intended target. This is something that is unjustifiable. It can't be justified under any circumstances. There's no element of the law of war that would allow this kind of indiscriminate attack. And yet Israel has done it because Israel has carried out similar indiscriminate attacks. I don't need to tell you about what Israel has done in terms of collective punishment for the people of Lebanon, for the people of Gaza. The notion that civilians have no rights, they are one and the same of the targeted groups. And Israel's gotten away with it. I mean, they've killed 40,000 Palestinians or more, depending on who's doing the counting, in Gaza, most of whom are women and children, and the world is doing nothing about it. So I think Israel felt that it could get away with this. And I think they would have gotten away with it except for one thing. They used personal electronics. Yeah. And there's not a person out there today that isn't in possession of one of these or a pager or something. And we all now look at that phone or look at that pager and say, there before the grace of God go us. And this is a line that Israel crossed without coordination, without coordinating with the United States, without coordinating with its partners. And it's created a huge confidence issue with people about Western-made electronics, about the companies that produce them. How did Israel get into apparently this Taiwanese affiliate in Hungary? How did Israel get into this factory? How did Israel make these adjustments? Who was in charge of quality control? Did the Hungarian factory know about this before? And did the Hungarian government know about this? And this is going to create, I think, a crisis of confidence amongst the consumers that could end up costing Western companies billions of dollars, because anybody with any shred of common sense will immediately throw away their Western-made electronic device and go find one that's sourced from a country such as China, where Israel is not going to be able to infiltrate and corrupt the integrity of the electronic device to achieve either intelligence collection goals or assassination.
Well, I think most people that saw this immediately thought, well, if Israel could do this to Lebanese people on their, Motorola, I believe it was Motorola pagers, then they could do that to anybody around the world and even in the United States. And of course, Mint Press has done extensive coverage on Israel's NSO group and its work with Celebrite. It's another tech company to infiltrate people's cell phones, spy on them, and to plan coordinated assassinations like they did with, what's his name? Jamal Khashoggi, Saudi Arabia's Jamal Khashoggi, excuse me. So Hezbollah has proven itself again as an effective fighting force against Israel. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be seeing these kinds of attempts by Israel to assassinate and disrupt Lebanese civil life and commit this kind of terrorist attack. You recently stated that Hezbollah's attacks against Israel have actually been limited. And we would agree with that. And that these attacks that Hezbollah has committed against Israel in defense of Palestine and Lebanon South are really just the tip of the iceberg. Could you explain what you mean by that? And does that mean we could potentially see a far more deadly attack on Israel if things escalate?
Well, Hezbollah as an organization has been successfully fighting Israel for some time now. They've actually defeated Israel twice. The first time was, I believe, in 2000 when they evicted Israel from southern Lebanon, massive Israeli defeat. And I think the second time was in 2006 when Israel entered into I think, a 30-day war and vowed to destroy Hezbollah. And at the end of the day, it was Israel that had to back down. Hezbollah was not destroyed. Since that time, Hezbollah has been singularly focused on improving how it would confront Israel in any future war, realizing that a future war would probably be existential in nature, meaning that it wouldn't be a limited conflict, it would be a conflict to the death. And that Hezbollah needed to do one of two things: create such capacity that Israel would never dare seek to destroy or eliminate Hezbollah, meaning that Israel would know that if it went down this path, the consequences could be the existential termination of Israel. Or, if called upon to do so, to actually defeat Israel strategically. We're in a unique situation here where this conflict between Israel and Hezbollah is not between Israel and Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. It's an extension of the conflict in Gaza, where right. Hezbollah has entered in this conflict in order to provide support to Hamas. And this is what people need to understand. The primary goal and objective of Hezbollah today is to support Hamas, to support the Palestinian cause. And anything that is done on the battlefield is done for that purpose. Hamas right now, in my opinion, and I know there might be people who disagree, is winning this conflict. They're winning it strategically. They're paying a horrible price for this. But on October 6th, nobody was talking about the creation of a Palestinian state. Today, that is it's on the tip of the tongue of so many people around the world. Why? Because the world has seen the truth about Israel. The world has been forced to look at Gaza and say, how did this happen? Why is this happening? The Israeli overreaction to October 7th actually backfired to the Israelis because the international community is not normally prone to digging too deep into Israeli-Palestinian storylines. And had the Israelis simply said, we were attacked and vicious things had happened to our people, the world would have rallied around Israel, I believe, and once again ignored the Palestinian cause. But Hamas knew what it was doing and knew that the Israelis would overreact, and the Israelis did. And in doing so, alienated the world that was inclined to be supportive of Israel. People around the world that said, I'm sympathetic to the Israeli cause, said, well, wait, I can't be sympathetic to the slaughter of Palestinian civilians. And then the lies told about Israel across the board about, who was responsible for the vast majority of the deaths, blaming it on Hamas when it was the IDF who killed most of the people who died on October 7th. The lack of rapes, no dead babies, no beheaded babies, just the gross exaggeration and outright fabrication of the narrative has been exposed. And Israel has not fared well. And so today we have the United Nations giving Palestine a seat. That was not going to happen on October 6th. Mm-hmm. We have European nations recognizing the existence of a Palestinian state. That would never have happened on October 6th. And we have Gulf Arab states who, as you have accurately said, have betrayed Palestine consistently. And they're not inclined to be supportive of Palestine even today. But the politics of the situation are that they cannot even think about normalizing relations with Israel until there is a Palestinian state, or at least discussion about this. So we're looking at a situation where, because of what Hamas has done, for the first time, there is realistic talk about the creation of a Palestinian state. Moreover, Israel has committed fatal harm to itself, economically, socially. I already talked about the damage done on the international community, but domestically, Israel is a deeply fractured state. Militarily, Israel was never organized to carry out a war of this duration. They didn't have the resources to sustain it. They've run out of spare parts. Israel is strategically defeated. And the reason why I say this is, now you put yourself in Hezbollah's shoes. Their goal was to help facilitate this strategic victory on the part of Hamas. They did so by engaging in carefully planned escalatory actions designed not to turn into a complete war, but to manage the conflict so that they drained Israeli resources away from Hamas. They further weakened Israel. Look what they've done in terms of 60,000 Israeli soldiers, settlers in the north that had to flee their homes. That is an economic drain on Israel. They've damaged the confidence that the Israeli people have in Israel. I mean, Israel was supposed to be this safe haven for Zionists who could come in and live in peace and harmony and prosper. Not today. Israel is a horror for these people. They don't live in peace. They don't live in harmony. They are not economically prospering. And eventually, many of these people will leave Israel, and that's the end of Israel. Hezbollah knows this. They are on a path of strategic victory. The one thing that would change this is if the nature of the war changed away from the focus where it rightly belongs on Israel's ongoing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, and instead shifted to a major regional conflict between Hezbollah and Israel. Hezbollah's goal has been to avoid this kind of escalation because it would be damaging to the strategic objective of helping Hamas. This terrorist act with the pagers is designed by Israel to provoke Hezbollah into carrying out a retaliation that would justify, not to the Israelis, but to the Americans, an Israeli response. The United States has been holding Israel back because they believe that any strategic conflict with Hezbollah would not end well for Israel. Hezbollah has built military resources, precision guided missiles that will defeat the Israeli missile shield, and if launched in significant numbers, wreak havoc on Israel politically, economically, militarily. The United States knows this. Many in the Israeli defense establishment know this, which is why an Israeli conflict against Hezbollah, where it's just Israel versus Hezbollah, is not sustainable. Israel needs the United States to come in on its side. The United States has made it clear that it will not do so if Israel is the initiator of the aggression that leads to a broader war. So what Israel has done here is carried out an action. And as we said, it's an action that the United States was cognizant of and possibly gave a green light to. Definitely will not condemn Israel for this. Hezbollah, I hope, recognizes this as a trap. It's such a horrific attack. The gut feeling is Hezbollah has to do something dramatic, has to do something. But I've listened to Hassan Nasrallah and I've listened to Hezbollah leaders. These are people who understand Israel perhaps better than many Israelis understand Israel. And I think they understand what's happening here. They definitely understand the geopolitical dynamic here. And they also understand that they're winning this conflict. Look, let's put it this way. If Israel were going to attack Hezbollah, why would you use this capability, which created huge disruption amongst Hezbollah, a lot of chaos, a lot of disruption, and did not do anything? See, the moment to attack Hezbollah is literally 1 minute after the pagers explode. Now Hezbollah is disrupted, command and control is disrupted. You come in heavy, you might have a chance to prevent Hezbollah from executing its plan. Hezbollah has adapted to this. What all the horrors that occurred, Hezbollah has already adapted. They are prepared for anything right now. So clearly Israel isn't looking to attack Hezbollah on its own volition. What Israel's looking for is Hezbollah to retaliate against Israel on a scope and scale significant enough for Israel to say, this is an existential threat. We must, to defend ourselves, respond aggressively, and the United States, you must come with us. That's the goal here. So I think that Hezbollah, it has the capability to defeat Israel, but understand that any war between Hezbollah and Israel isn't going to be a one-way street. I mean, you've been to Lebanon. You know the history of Beirut. You know what Israel did to Beirut. You know what Israel did to southern Lebanon. You know what Israel's capable of doing. Israel will destroy Lebanon in any conflict between Hezbollah and Israel. Israel may be destroyed as well, but for the people of Lebanon, This would be an absolutely devastating conflict. And at the beginning, you said that the Matt Miller in the United States views Hezbollah as this militant terrorist organization, but it's not. It's a political party, part of the Lebanese government, and they are committed to the betterment of Lebanese society. They are committed to doing good by the Lebanese people. This is why Hassan Nasrallah will never initiate an attack against Israel that brings unnecessary harm down on the Lebanese people, because he is a Lebanese political leader. He is a man committed to safeguarding Lebanon. And this is a dynamic that is often missed in the West, that Hezbollah isn't a terrorist organization. They aren't a militia. They are a political party committed to doing right by the people of Lebanon, by the Lebanese government, by the region as a whole. So even though they have the ability to defend themselves, I think that Hezbollah will behave responsibly here and carry out Hassan Nasrallah's strategic goal of helping Hamas by carefully managing the escalation. That's my take.
So just to clarify, I'm Palestinian American. I'm not from Lebanon. I've never been to Lebanon. I'm from Al-Quds, Jerusalem. Oh, okay. That's okay. But I think it's really important. The points that you made are very important because a lot of people are looking at what's happening in Gaza and for so long have asked the question, like, if Hezbollah was truly trying to defend Palestine, why don't they do more? And so you really painted a great picture of why strategically this is the take, and this is why they're taking the actions that they are, because they know that these kinds of terrorist attacks by Israel are really just poking at Hezbollah so that they can pull them into a broader war and have Hezbollah do the bigger damage, the stronger damage, so that Israel can draw the United States into a broader conflict. And of course, neither Hezbollah nor Iran nor other countries that are resisting Israeli occupation and this genocide want. And you kind of answered my question about Hamas, but I'd like to know, before I get into the next question, I actually just want to remind everybody that this video and all interviews that we put out on our YouTube channel and our podcast on Spotify are all funded and supported by our members on Patreon. So if you're enjoying this conversation with Scott Ritter and myself, please become a member on our Patreon. You can join for as little as $5. As you can see, and as you're hearing, we are independent media that rely on our donors and our viewers and our readers. And we're standing up against a very strong military machine. And we are looking to break through the fog of war and dissect these war narratives that are in the interest of the public. And so, Scott, I'm curious to know, do you think this war has actually left Hamas in a stronger position than before? You talked a lot about, Palestine as a state is now in the conversation, but what about militarily and strategically? Is Hamas in a stronger position than before October 7th?
Well, let's talk about Hamas before October 7th.
Sure.
First of all, amongst the Palestinian people, Hamas was not necessarily widely embraced as the legitimate leadership of Palestine. There are many people who are frustrated with Fatah, frustrated with the Palestinian Authority, frustrated with President Abbas. But the history between Hamas and Fatah is not a good history, a very bloody history, very controversial history. And so there were many people in the Palestinian community that did not view Hamas as being capable of representing them when it comes to their aspirations for statehood. Hamas was never organized to defeat Israel. Hamas was always organized to defend Palestine, to defend Gaza. They're not like Hezbollah, which is a conventional fighting force. Hamas was an organization militarily designed to protect Palestinian interests in Gaza, in the West Bank, if given the opportunity, but not to invade and occupy Israel. So we have to be realistic about the military capacity of Hamas. And the other thing was that Hamas was having a hard time generating any traction on the international community about a Palestinian state, because they were undermined by the Palestinian Authority. This is my personal opinion. People can disagree with me as they want. I respect that. But I think there's wide agreement that President Abbas was doing the bidding of Israel, facilitating Israeli concerns, Israeli interests over that of the Palestinian people. Ineffective in standing up to the Abraham Accords, which were just gutting Palestinian statehood by legitimizing, or at least turning a blind eye to, Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And so on October 6th, if you were looking at Hamas, with few exceptions, if you had just done one of those standard, Western tests where we throw a word at you and you respond, bird, fly, tree, green, Hamas, terrorist. Okay. That's where Hamas stood in the mindset of many people. October 7th came, very, very difficult day, no matter how you slice it, a very difficult day, but a day that will go down in history as changing everything. Because it set in motion the events where we find ourselves today. Hamas is still a military organization that cannot defeat Israel. It's not designed to go into Israel, occupy Israel, defeat the Israeli army. But it has more than accomplished its task of defending Gaza from the Israelis. Not like a conventional army does, but in the way that Hamas was designed to do, to go underground, to make the Israelis come to them, to wage guerrilla warfare, to wage unconventional warfare, to make the Israelis die the death of 1,000 cuts. And look at Hamas. We're almost a year into this conflict, and they haven't been defeated. They haven't been defeated. When Israel withdraws from a piece of territory that it's completely leveled above ground, Hamas reemerges from underground. The Israelis haven't destroyed the tunnel network. Hamas still has the ability to maneuver the way it was designed to maneuver, to attack the Israelis and inflict casualties on the Israelis that are becoming unbearable for Israel. Hamas has suffered casualties. Let there be no doubt about that. But Hamas has also won over, I think, a significant proportion of the Palestinian population, especially those in Gaza. My understanding is that Hamas has recruited more fighters after October 7th than they've lost. So they've actually become stronger in terms of numbers. My understanding, too, is that Hamas is able to receive weapons and logistics sustainability. We can use our imagination on how that occurs. But, whatever the Israelis have tried to do to strangle Gaza, to strangle Hamas militarily, has not succeeded. And that's part of their planning. So from a military standpoint, Hamas is winning because they're not losing. Remember, the Israeli military objective was to physically destroy Hamas as a military organization. That has not happened. They are not in control. They being Israel are not in control of Gaza. And anytime they leave a section of Gaza, Hamas returns. That's not the definition of destruction. Politically, again, I don't want to pretend to be an expert on Palestinian affairs. I'm a non-Palestinian who's assessing this from far away. But if I were a betting man and Las Vegas would take the odds, I would bet almost everything I have on that if there were fair and free elections in Palestine today, Hamas would win those elections. That Hamas is more popular amongst the Palestinian people than Fatah or the Palestinian Authority, President Abbas. Why? Because Hamas is fighting. Hamas is fighting for the people of Palestine. And the people of Palestine, I believe, for the first time, have hope in their hearts about a Palestinian state. And where did that come from? From Abbas? Nope. From the Palestinian Authority? Nope. From Fatah? No. That hope only came from the resistance of Hamas. Only came. And Israel has said that not only did they want to destroy Hamas politically, but that they would never negotiate with Hamas. How did the world respond to that? Well, we saw the Russians begin a process that was culminated in China, where 14 Palestinian factions were brought together, including Hamas, to try and bring them into a singular political entity that would represent the Palestinian people at the negotiating table. Hamas is part of this. Now, this won't be called Hamas for political reasons, but the reality is Hamas has made it impossible to ignore Hamas. Hamas is the most relevant political movement amongst the Palestinians today, and they will play a leading role in shaping the future of a Palestinian state. That's a huge victory for Hamas, a huge victory. So when people say, has Hamas been defeated, or what is, I would say no, Hamas has won across the board. Now, the price they are paying is horrible, horrible. And you could condemn Hamas for this, because here's my assessment. Hamas knew that this price would be horrible. Hamas knew exactly what it was doing, but it was the only way forward. On October 6th, nobody was talking about a Palestinian state. On October 6th, Israel was on the cusp of normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia that would solidify this new geopolitical reality that would guarantee there would never be a Palestinian state, ever. It would have been the end of Palestine. Today, that has changed because of what Hamas did. But the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, are paying a horrible price. This is an analogy that sometimes gets me in trouble, but I use it anyways because I feel that it's an accurate analogy. The Allies in World War II were going to land in Europe, and they picked Normandy to be the place to land. D-Day, the 6th of June. Dwight D. Eisenhower approached Charles de Gaulle, the leader of the Free French, and he said, we're going to go across Normandy. He said, but the actions we're going to take to liberate France are going to require us to kill between 60 and 100,000 French civilians. And de Gaulle said, do it. Now, de Gaulle never went to an anniversary of D-Day because in his heart he couldn't bear the pain and suffering, knowing that he signed off on the deaths of 60,000 French civilians, that was the price that had to be paid for liberty. To liberate France from Nazi Germany, 60,000 French civilians had to be sacrificed at the hands of the Allies in order to achieve this. If you want a Palestinian state, you're not going to get it for free. You're only going to get it through the sacrifice of the civilians who are the collateral damage done to achieve this victory over Israel. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing. But I think Hamas understood that in order to defeat Israel, you had to show the world the truth about Israel. That the world ignored when Israel initiated its the Dahiwa, I think I'm mispronouncing. I'm sure the
Dahia,
suburb of
Dahia, yeah.
Dahia. When Israel leveled that as just to say we're making the civilians pay a price.
Yeah.
They ignored when Israel went into Gaza repeatedly. They've ignored this. Mm-hmm. The crimes that had to be committed by Israel needed to be so great, so public, so horrific that the world could not ignore them. And Hamas gave Israel a chance to prove to the world who they are and what they are. They're a genocidal regime committed to a system of apartheid. Israel is very good at propaganda. Some of the best in the world comes out of Israel. I was a victim of it as myself when I was a weapons inspector and I traveled to Israel in 1990s. They put me on the helicopter. They flew me to the Golan Heights. They flew me to Masada. They flew me all around. They showed me the glory of Israel. It was glorious. I have to be honest. Israel is a beautiful Palestine, whatever you want to call it. The land there is beautiful. And the people that live there were wonderful people, the ones I saw. But I saw only one side of the story, because over here were villages that I wasn't allowed to go to, where the Palestinians lived. but I was told that they're the problem, not the solution. And I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. I was on the side of Israel. This conflict, October 7th, and what happened afterwards, forever changed me, because what I saw wasn't a responsible nation responding to horrific events. What I saw was a genocidal nation doing that which it was inclined to do. The truth of Israel came out, that it is not just the secular state with superficial attachment to the Jewish faith, but a nation that has been thoroughly infiltrated by religious fanatics, Zionists, who rely on the Talmud to define the Hebrew faith, the Jewish faith. Amalek. They treat the Palestinians as animals that need to be slaughtered. This truth would never have been exposed to the world if it weren't for October 7th. It now has been exposed, and Israel will never save its reputation. Will never save its reputation. We have seen the truth of Israel, and you can't unsee that. And you see the truth of Israel every day. I'm just being honest with you. I cried when Hind Raji was murdered. And I've cried when I've seen the photograph.
It was horrific.
The photographs of the babies. My wife cries. I cry with my wife. I had to stop looking at them. I'm just being honest. I had to stop looking at them. They're there. I can't look at them anymore because my heart is shattered into a million pieces. But I can justify not looking at them because I know the truth about Israel. I don't need to see these pictures to prove what Israel is. I know what Israel is, and the world knows what Israel is. Yeah. The horror that's taking place today with the Palestinian people will go down in history as one of the greatest crimes committed against humanity in modern history. And it's why Israel not only no longer has a right to exist, but in the future will not exist. Israel has lost the right to exist. And it's not me saying that. It's the Israeli public realizing this now. You're starting to see within Israel a growing recognition that what they have become is incompatible with modern civilization. And I do believe in the course of the next years, you're going to see Israelis fleeing Israel, going back to where they came from. And this will be the end of Israel, and hopefully the beginning of not a two-state solution, but a one-state solution called Palestine, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews can live together in peace and harmony as a singularity, as opposed to this apartheid Zionist entity that occupies Palestine today.
Absolutely. I mean, a one-state solution, which sounds crazy, right? Like a one state where all religious people live under the banner of a true democracy and human rights. That's all that Palestinians are asking for. And, I remember when you first mentioned that theory to me, I guess you could call it, when you said that Hamas knew that this was the price that they would have to pay to show the world what true Israeli crimes and what they're capable of. It doesn't sit well, I think, in just the average person's stomach. It doesn't sit well because they think, well, don't they have a moral compass and they don't want to see their civilians slaughtered? But the truth is that, this is the true face of Israel. This is the true face of its apartheid system, of its genocidal mission to occupy and erase Palestinians. And this has now been brought to the international forefront, where even the Western governments who are funding it, arming it, supporting it, are now being questioned and disrupted about this. And I think just like with the fall of South African apartheid, at some point, which I do think that it's going to be coming soon, of course, not without a big fight from Israel, the United States is going to have to, face the truth that it's been, building and supporting this apartheid system that is getting out of control. I mean, it's been out of control, but now it's like really getting out of control. And so I just want to
just to add on to that real quick. And I agree with you. I mean, it's a horrible thing to comprehend. or to even wrap your head around, why would Hamas willingly go down this path, knowing the price that would be paid? Where is their moral compass?
But did they have any other? Did they have anything else?
Well, but the point is, the implication is that life in Gaza was tolerable. Gaza was a concentration camp. How many generations of Palestinians have to grow up in an open air prison? Mm-hmm. At what point in time do prisoners say enough is enough?
Exactly.
That continued enslavement and continued imprisonment is worse than life itself. Mm-hmm. And if you're a Palestinian adult with children, or somebody who wants to have children, who wants to raise their children in a prison? Who wants to raise them as prisoners in an apartheid state? Who wants to bring new life into this? In order to justify the continuation of Palestine, there has to be a Palestine. And if you have to sacrifice for that, then the sacrifice is justifiable. That's easy for me to say thousands of miles removed. But, I take solace in the knowledge that the civilians in Gaza, I can't speak for all of them. I can't. And I can't speak for the people who have lost their loved ones. They may disagree with me. But I do think the people in Gaza are wearing their suffering with pride, because they know what this fight is about.
Yeah.
They know what the struggle is about. They know what the sacrifices are about. And when this is all said and done, I hope that there is a giant monument built in Gaza where the names of every martyr is carved upon the wall, so that all future generations of Palestinians come there and give thanks to the sacrifice they made so that they can have a homeland.
That's deep. And as we know, that list of names is quite long right now. According to the Lancet Institute, there could be up to 180,000 Palestinians dead from this crisis right now. On a positive note, this war in Gaza has been full of surprises. And one of the biggest surprise, I think, on the international stage has been the reaction of Yemen, which is the poorest country in the Middle East. It's not a poor country. It's rich in minerals, rich in, ancient history and civilization. But because of, the US war on terror, because of the Saudi blockade, it has become the poorest country in the Middle East. Yemen has suffered tremendously from US Saudi-backed genocide itself. The United States and the UAE currently have occupied the southern part of Yemen. They've set up sexual torture sites, et cetera, et cetera. Obama's famous drone wars took place in Yemen and in Afghanistan. But the Yemenis have risen above this tide of horror that they have experienced, and they've enforced this Red Sea blockade against American, Israeli, and British ships. And what's really interesting about this, as you probably already know, is that, Scott, is that because of this Yemeni Red Sea blockade, Yemen has actively and successfully, Ansarullah, bankrupted Israel's Eilat port. They've bankrupted it. And so what we have seen, I'm just going to go down this listicle that I wrote up, and I'd like to get your reaction to this. Because of that, we have countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Jordan assisting Israel in circumventing that Red Sea blockade. So we have Israeli-linked cargo ships arriving in the United Arab Emirates to unload the goods. Then trucks leave and transport these goods through the UAE and Saudi Arabian highways to Jordan. Then they eventually reach Israel via the Jordan River crossing. And we all know that German shipping company, they crossed, the train stations here, the Hapag-Lloyd. They've announced that it was working with Saudi Arabia and the UAE to create a land route bypassing the Houthis, which connects ports in the UAE and the Saudi port of Jeddah, facilitating cargo movement to Israel through the Suez Canal. And right now, because of the Abraham Accords, thanks to the Abraham Accords and thanks to the Red Sea Yemeni blockade and its success, Egypt has dedicated 5 ports to provide over $330 million worth of exports to Israel. And we can assume that weapons are probably being provided, right? And military equipment for the Israeli military. And what we do also know, Scott, is that during the Arab Summit in Riyadh, the access of assistance, which are Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Morocco, and Jordan, all voted against an oil embargo against Israel and voted against limiting US airspace for Washington to ship weapons to Israel. And I just want to mention a couple of other countries. Turkey right now, 40% of Israel's energy needs runs through a pipeline from Azerbaijan through Turkey to Israel. And Turkey could cut that oil off at any moment, but they can't. And of course, we know that Egypt currently has dedicated the 5 ports, while simultaneously blocking 5 miles of aid trucks lined up at the Rafah border. I mean, the Sisi government could open up that border, but he won't. And we've seen those operations on the Egyptian border, the Jordan border, where people are now reacting and taking matters into their own hands, because which have resulted in their trucks blowing up and killing Israeli soldiers, because they're just so disgusted and disturbed by the genocide in Gaza. And the last 2 I want to mention, because of the Abraham Accords, the Saudi-backed group Affinity Partners owns a stake in the Israeli company Shlomo Group. During the conflict in Gaza, the Shlomo Group contributed trucks and military equipment to the Israeli military's Shaldag and Maglan units, as well as food packages to the IDF. Saudi Arabia has notoriously used Israeli spy tech, NSO, and Celebrite, as I mentioned earlier, on activists and journalists. And as we know, NSO spying tools were installed on Jamal Khashoggi's phone and were used to kill him. That was an assassination. The UAE and Saudi Arabia have become major shareholders in Kirchner's Phoenix Holdings Company. Of course, we all know Jared Kushner is the one who led the Abraham Accords. So these 2 countries are major shareholders in Phoenix Holdings Company, which funds Israeli settlements and military installments. Okay, the UAE also has opened up a subsidiary partner weapons manufacturer for Israel's Elbit Systems, called Elbit Systems Emiratis. Now, Elbit Systems is Israel's largest arms manufacturer. And the UAE and Israel occupy the Yemeni Socotra Islands and have set up surveillance hubs there to spy on Iran and China. And then we have Morocco, finally. Israel and Morocco have also built an intelligence base near the border of Algeria. And then we are also seeing the building of Elbit Systems as well in Morocco, because as we know, Elbit Systems is being targeted in countries like the UK, where Palestine Action activists, with the help of its community, they're shutting down and targeting these Israeli weapons companies, which have cost Elbit Systems millions upon millions of dollars worth of contracts. And so they're going to Palestine's Arab neighbors, where the majority of the population, Scott, are against the genocide in Gaza. And yet their governments, thanks to the Abraham Accords and US-Israeli military alliances, are basically pumping Israel with more weapons, with more money. But then we also have, on the brighter side, I guess you could say, the axis of resistance with Hezbollah, with Yemen, with Iran. So based on what I have just shared and presented to you, what do you think about all of this? And is there going to be a point where these access of assistance countries are going to cave in to what their populations want?
What you've painted is a picture that on the face, I think would depress many people who support Palestine. And it is a depressing picture. But what it really is, because let's again go back to October 6th. On October 6th, 2023, Israel was on the cusp of normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. You know, that trucking route that you talk about where ships land in the United Arab Emirates and then are placed on trucks that go through UAE to Saudi Arabia to Jordan, then on to Israel. Um, this was supposed to be a railroad. This was supposed to be part of something that Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu touted as the India Middle East European economic corridor, linking um, South Asia through the Middle East to Europe, going from Indian ports to Dubai or Abu Dhabi, getting on trains, transiting UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, hooking up to Haifa, getting on container ships, going to Greece, and you have this linkage. And this isn't just somebody's fantasy. Benjamin Netanyahu, in last year's uh, General Assembly debate in September, instead of putting up the picture of the Iranian bomb that he likes to put up, he had a map that showed this. And he said, this is the future of Israel. This is the future of everything. He was able to say that because so many people had committed to that vision. There was a lot of political capital and economic capital committed to that vision. What you're seeing in what you call the axis of assistance is the death gasp of the axis of assistance. You can't just shut them down overnight. They have contacts, they have connectivity, they have resources, and so they are desperately trying to construct an alternative to get around the actions of the axis of resistance. And if we viewed it in this vacuum, it's a difficult struggle. One would say advantage axis of assistance. But let's be real here. Let's back off and talk about another struggle that's taking place on a broader geopolitical scale. And that's the struggle between the rules-based international order and BRICS. The Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa economic forum that's becoming an establishment. In Kazan in October, Russia is hosting a BRICS summit. Last year, it was hosted by South Africa. Last year, BRICS expanded, and the expansion included Iran, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Ethiopia, Argentina. Argentina has dropped out. Saudi Arabia was demurring, but now MBS, the Saudi crown prince, he's going to Kazan. Saudi Arabia is dropping the dollar as its currency of choice for its oil. This is a direct attack on the rules-based international order. United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia has normalized relations with Iran. Their geopolitical focus is going to be on Kazan, on BRICS, on the global stage. That's the strategic direction. And when you look at it from that standpoint, the axis of assistance is such a minor slice of that. It's a rearguard action being carried out by people who had bought into this relationship with Israel. That's an unsustainable relationship. The axis of assistance does not make money. The axis of assistance loses money. It's not good business. It's bad business. BRICS is about economic opportunity. And when you are trying to rationalize your economy, you dump the poor performing aspects of your economy. And the axis of assistance is a poor performing aspect of the economy. Not only that, but you can't have a situation where strategically Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are positioning themselves to be adversarial to Iran when they all want to be part of a BRICS group that speaks of multilateral consensus. So the strategic focus of Saudi Arabia, of UAE, is not a retrograde action back to an Israel that no longer exists, the Israel of October 6th, but instead it's of nations that are moving towards a broader geopolitical cooperation, and they're being dragged, held onto by the people that wanted that but can't have it, are trying to get it, and eventually it's going to get cut. So when you look at it from that standpoint, your axis of assistance is doomed to fail, and it will fail. And I think after October, you're going to see dramatic changes in how these nations view the issue of Israel and Palestine.
This October?
Russia, pardon?
This coming October?
In what's going to happen in Kazan is that, and I guess when we talk, the Kazan, the summit, is Russia is not just talking about expanding. Remember, you talked about two things: Azerbaijani oil flowing through pipelines through Turkey. Azerbaijan is now wants to be a member of BRICS. Erdogan is going to Kazan because Turkey, a NATO member, wants to be a member of BRICS. This is a radical sea change in global perspectives that's taking place that will redefine how the world works. In order for this to happen, institutions have to be made. Last year, South Africa oversaw the expansion of BRICS. This year is about Russia codifying that, turning it into institutions, creating mechanisms where ministerial meetings can take place, where nations come together so to work things out throughout the year, where as problems manifest, they come together to reach a consensus-driven solution to these problems. One of the big problems facing the world today is Palestine, Israel, Gaza. Saudi Arabia is going to be sitting at a table with major trading partners that its future economic prosperity depends upon: Russia, India, China. And they're going to look to Saudi Arabia and say, what are we doing about resolving this issue? What is this that you're doing about, running these covert supply chains into Israel? Is that really a solution? Do we not need to think in terms of a bigger picture? And then other people will raise it up. And Saudi Arabia is going to have to basically say, yeah, you're right. This isn't going to work. Let's talk about what works. And they're going to shift. The UAE is going to have to do that. Iran, the pressure we put on Iran. Hey, you're putting all this effort into the axis of resistance. What can we do to prevent this adversarial thing? How do we get to a solution? Instead of sustaining the problem, how do we get to a solution? And pressure we put on Iran to say, okay, we need to talk about solutions, not just sustaining problems. BRICS has huge potential to be what the United Nations should have been, except for the corruption of the United States, Great Britain, and France.
I was just about to say that. Wow. Yeah.
So I'm hopeful. I'm very optimistic about BRICS. And I do believe that it will have a level of influence on this axis of assistance that you speak of that will compel them to stop sustaining a problem and start looking at how to solve the problem, resolve the problem.
I mean, what you've just presented, we can conclude, though, then that the Abraham Accords mean nothing, and that the US moving forward is going to be quite irrelevant to what happens in the Middle East. Is my understanding that correctly?
Absolutely. I think my personal opinion is that the Abraham Accord exists in name only. It's a piece of paper that these desperate individuals and political and economic interest groups within a variety of nations hold on to, saying this was our future. This was our future. It's like me investing in a stock and looking at the stock collapse, and I'm looking at my shares saying this was my future. Well, not anymore. The company collapsed. Whatever you thought you had, you no longer had. And the concept of the United States is no longer relevant. There's not a single nation in the Middle East. Even Israel knows that the United States cannot be seen as an impartial broker. The United States has made its decision. It is Team Israel. And so nobody will trust the United States. This is the reality. We talk about what happens on November 5th, a new president.
Yeah.
And they keep, everybody's sitting there saying, well, I can't wait to see what, Kamala Harris's policy is free of Biden, or I can't wait to see what Donald Trump says. I don't view it that way.
Yeah.
What I say is, I want to see about what the future president of the United States does with the reality handed to them about Gaza, Israel. You see, it's the height of American narcissism, hubris, to believe that we are solely empowered with envisioning a solution to the problems of the Middle East. The Palestinian people, you don't understand the issues of Palestine like America does. Israel, you don't understand the problems like America does. Only America has the ability to sit down with our wisdom and dictate solutions. That sounds absurd, doesn't it? But that's what you're really saying when you say, well, I want to see what Kamala Harris's policy is. I want to see what Donald Trump's policy is. Who cares?
Exactly.
The only vote out there is the vote of the Palestinian people who have already shown an ability to suffer 40 to 186,000 dead in support of their cause. They are not retreating from that. The Hamas will not surrender. Hezbollah will not back down. The axis of resistance will not yield. The Houthi will not give up the fight. No matter who the president of the United States is. If your name is Donald Trump, you don't make the lack of lethality inherent in a carrier battle group go away. The United States has already deployed carrier battle groups to the Red Sea, to the Gulf of Aden, to intimidate the Houthi, who did not back down, who actually drove the American Navy out of victory. Whoever is the president can't change this reality. This is a reality that American policy is going to be compelled to adapt to yield to, especially because the world no longer looks to America for a solution. After October, the world is going to be increasingly looking to BRICS for a solution. And the BRICS solution is going to be far more compelling because it's not going to be based upon the might of the sword. It's going to be based upon economic strength. It's going to be based upon humanity. It's going to be based upon the things that people really care about. America only knows violence. We only offer violence. How do we mollify Israeli concerns? More arms, more ammunition. Instead of saying less arms, less ammunition, let's talk about this, let's resolve this peacefully. No, we give weapons. We solve the problem through weapons. That's all we do. How do we mollify Egypt? Weapons. BRICS isn't going to be about distributing weapons. BRICS is going to be about distributing wealth, economic stability, prosperity, infrastructure development, the things that matter. And I think that's why come next year, who cares what America thinks? Because America no longer matters. We are not the indispensable nation. We are the dispensable nation.
I mean, there's a lot of hope in those statements, and I feel that myself. There are countries that are part of BRICS, like India, which is one of the strongest economies, biggest economies in the world, that's rising and rising and rising. And they are one of Israel's biggest allies as well. And then you talked about Saudi Arabia joining and the UAE joining. Could any of that backfire on Palestine? I know overall that the goal of BRICS is to distribute wealth and reduce conflicts, and the weapons flows, of course, but could Israel be building alliances that could maybe backfire on Palestine?
It could. I mean, again, in the world of international diplomacy, especially with something that is it's so early into BRICS, is to actually know what it's going to end up looking like. The Russians have a vision that's been coordinated closely with their major partners. I will say this. Vladimir Putin will definitely be at Kazan. Xi Jinping is going to be at Kazan, and Modi is going to be at Kazan. Those are the big three. All right. They have agreed that they want BRICS to succeed. And through that agreement, they've created a center of gravity that is attracting, gravitationally drawing in people who all agree on a shared vision. The Russians and the Chinese are not new to the Middle East problems. China, of course, famously negotiated the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia that nobody saw coming.
That was a big, nice surprise. Yeah, absolutely.
And China is, again, nobody saw them bringing 14 Palestinian factions together in Beijing to come together as a singularity. Russia's been playing a very quiet role behind the scenes, talking, facilitating negotiations. They all have connectivity with all these nations we've spoken of, connectivity that in the West we ignore. When we say Saudi Arabia, we say, oh, that's an American-aligned country. but Saudi Arabia and China have a level of connectivity that eclipses that's with the Americans because it's economic, not military. We tend to ignore it. Russia plays an important role in Saudi Arabia's global thinking. And so I think when we talk about, well, can somehow these nations, their pro-Israeli inclinations be used to sabotage Palestine, I would say probably not. I think instead what will happen is that they will be pressured into putting pressure on Israel. It's not going to be Israel putting pressure on them to sabotage BRICS. It's going to be the coming together of all this political and economic and geopolitical power that's going to draw these nations this way, and they're going to tell Israel, you either come with us or we cut you off.
Yeah.
That you can't be this impediment. We need you to find a peaceful resolution to this problem. And the interesting thing about, because now let's get down to brass tacks. What does that mean? Because to be honest, the only peaceful resolution to the problem that would be acceptable in the international community is a two-state solution. And so what BRICS is going to be saying, and that's the only thing BRICS is talking about right now. There's nobody in BRICS talking about a one-state solution. It's all two-state solution. Now, you and I both know that that's impossible to see. But let me walk you through this. Let me tell you why this is what's going to happen in my mind. Because it's the only thing the international community is willing to consider right now. So pressure will be put on Israel to begin the process of manifesting a two-state solution. That's Israel's only out of its current crisis. Its only escape. And eventually it will have to do so. But look at what has to happen. They will have to dismantle the West Bank settlements. Israel cannot survive the dismantling. That is the suicide pill. And there it is. Because Israel can't survive that, Israel won't survive it. And when you start the dismantlement of it, you'll begin the process where people start fleeing Israel. And demographically, when you get the Israeli population down to a certain level, it becomes unsustainable as a Jewish homeland. And therefore, at that point in time, the demographics dictate the outcome, which is a single state solution. So there's a lot of people saying, I would never support a two-state solution, never support a process. I tell them, support it, embrace it, because it can't happen. The processes required for it to happen are impossible for Israel to achieve. And Israel will destroy itself trying to make it happen, but it will have no choice. And then you get the single state solution. And so that's why I think what's happening with BRICS and everything, because some people are saying, okay, you say that, but how do we get to a Palestinian state? A singularity. Well, you have to go through Israel. You can't make Israel disappear on your own. Israel will have to make Israel disappear. Israel will have to lose legitimacy externally and internally. And the key to that is the dismantlement of the West Bank settlements, the reversal of the Abraham Accord. And Israel, I don't believe, can survive that as a Zionist entity, as a Jewish homeland. And as a result, what's left of Israel will have to sit down at a table eventually and talk about a single state called Palestine.
Yeah. Very, very good stuff. And I think that you've left us with some hope for the future, because a lot of people are sitting around watching this genocide unfold and play before our eyes on our smartphones. And, everyone's just kind of waiting for something to come in and fix the situation, save the situation, save the children of Gaza. But we have a lot of different aspects to think about. Now, I had a lot more questions for you, but I just don't think that we have enough time.
No, we'll have to do that another time.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to schedule another interview, which I hope that you will join me again. But Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, I hope that we can talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.